Mic working okay? Yep. Well, thanks everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time, especially on Friday morning. I understand the party got pretty good last night. I need to talk to my local colleagues. They had me up in Raleigh and then driving down here after dinner last night, so I missed all the festivities. So I heard it was a great time. I want to start off on a quick admission. In addition to being a college basketball fan, I am a Georgetown Hoyas fan. My connections to North Carolina previously have been through some college basketball. I saw Duke UNC in 2004, amazing game at Cameron. In 2006, it was a win for Georgetown over Duke. It was undefeated at the time and sort of put Georgetown back on the map. In 2007, I was up at the Elite Eight where Georgetown in overtime beat UNC. And then North Carolina got tremendous retribution on the Hoyas in a win by Steph Curry and Davidson to just destroy the Hoyas and to come from behind win. And so I come from a place of mutual admiration of college basketball and some great sports experiences. So here to talk today a little bit about cybersecurity. I've had the opportunity to speak with some of your colleagues too and hear a little bit about day-to-day challenges and much of what I've expected and things that I've lived through. It starts with day-to-day fire, right? There's a punch list. There's always a new issue that comes up. On the IT side, we're always chasing after new things, and I'll get into it a little bit later. But right now, the offense has the advantage in the cybersecurity arena. We are far too frequently as cybersecurity professionals and as IT professionals. We're doing things manually that need to be automated if we're ever going to get ahead of the attack. But I think I have seen a lot of prominence and importance on the work that you all do from day to day, and also in some low probability but high consequence chances, where at the national level and to the economy, there's some real potential impact. So the operation of the 911 system, the basic ability for citizens to call in, increasingly we will be moving through voice over IP, reliance on cell phone data. We're moving towards IT networks for this basic functionality. And whether it's experiences that we've seen in the kinetic worlds around hurricanes, around terrorist attacks, those cell phone systems are the first ones to go down in case of a large-scale incident. As we move towards a reliance on IT and new types of technology for that type of system, the cybersecurity of that system will increasingly become important. And that's going to fall in a lot of cases to the professionals in this room at the local level, at the municipal level, to ensure the security, availability, and reliability of those networks. Similarly, as we move towards FirstNet, so first responder capabilities, the picture I have up here is from the Boston Marathon attack. The ability for first responders to talk to each other in a terrorist attack, in a hurricane, in a large-scale event, just like the 911 system will be taxed. The ability as we move from a typical push-to-talk from first responders for fire, for EMS, for police, to greater capabilities, to greater ability to have GPS location and tools that we can put in the hands of operators. We got to make sure the basics of that are in place with that technology evolution. So that's how you have a fireproof glove on and move from a typical push-to-talk to these new technologies, because you can't be in a fire moving through your iPhone screen, but also the safety and availability. We've seen around the world in terrorist attacks, again under older legacy technology, efforts to go after the first responders. So you'll see one bomb, then as first responders move in, there'll be a much bigger explosion. The increasing reliance on IT and new technology is going to create new vulnerabilities. So you couple a kinetic attack on first responders, potentially with misinformation. So you allocate resources from fire, EMS, police to the wrong location to break into the network. And again, there's a federal, state, and local partnership with that, but I think you all know very well that in a real disaster, everyone is their own first responder for at least the first 48 to 72 hours. And so that availability, reliability, security of those networks is going to fall in large cases to folks like you in this room. Some other examples. 2011 was in Illinois, supposed cybersecurity water incident. Let me take you back. I was within the Department of Homeland Security at the time, and one of my primary roles was to interface with Congress. On a personal level, the day that this all started off and the news started to break about this, I came home to my house. My wife and I had been out, and the fire sprinkler in my townhouse had gone off and faulted, and for 2 hours was gushing water. So it ruined my house, had the walls ripped out, floors ripped out. I'm looking down at my email every once in a while in between calling the insurance company, and I see a notice that there are news reports that there has been a Russian cyber attack on a rural water facility in Springfield, Illinois. I just started this and went back to try and get the walls ripped out of my house before we had mold damage. The next day, I was doing a similar thing, trying to deal with my personal issues. Congress starts calling. The Washington Post comes out with a story, New York Times, national media comes up as if, you know, the Russian invasion has started, and it has started on a water facility in Springfield, Illinois. So I call my ICS guys. I'm like, is there anything to this? They said, you know, we haven't seen the evidence here, but 90% sure this is nothing at all. So I'm calling back some of the congressional committees and some of the offices. Guys, there's nothing to this, but the stories keep coming in the national media. And it was one of the most sort of frenzied I've seen Congress, and that includes in large-scale, national security events. This was one of the things, for whatever reason, that the media really spun Congress up about. And so I was sitting in my loft as people were tearing out the walls to my house, and set up a phone call for 100 congressional staffers on the phone with the director of ICS CERT at the Department of Homeland Security. Talked through what we knew, what we didn't know. We started getting log files, and there was a request for assistance from this water facility. They sent us their logs. My guys said offline, now I'm 95% sure there's nothing to this, but the media and Congress kept spinning up that this may have been an attack in some way. So we sent guys from a flyaway team out there to look at everything. What it turned out to be was that the IT system relied upon a contractor. That contractor had remote access to the network. That contractor was married to a woman from Russia. This guy went over to visit his in-laws in Russia and happened to check in on the status of the IT system at the same time that some 40-year-old piece of iron broke. And so somebody took those two unrelated pieces of information and sent up an unverified raw intelligence report that then got in the hands of the media and made my life absolutely miserable. And so, aside from the personal annoyance, though, it speaks to much of critical infrastructure, water, electricity, etc., is run, owned, and operated at the state, local, municipal level. And there is tremendous interest when something like this occurs in the potential of attack and in the knowledge that this critical infrastructure is one of the places where we can be most vulnerable. We have connected typically 40, 50-year-old industrial control systems, oftentimes operated now with software for greater availability. We are on the mic.
It's outside. Talk about it's outside.
My being cyber attack, right? So this mission matters. It matters at a national level, and it sparks tremendous interest. Talk about that. The New York dam in Rye, New York, just recently was the first indictment of Iranian hackers for attacks on U.S. critical infrastructure. Justice Department came out and indicted Iranian hackers for primarily two issues. One was the denial of service attacks on the U.S. financial services sector. The other was an intrusion, unlike the Springfield water issue, an intrusion into the control systems in the dam in Rye, New York, just north of Manhattan. And so some of the pushback about this is, why are you bothering indicting Iranians? They're never going to be in an extradition type place. The answer from the Department of Justice is, number one, if you allow these things to go on over time, with no retribution and no mechanism of recourse, they become accepted and continue. Number two, even bad guys from Iran and other countries where we don't have extradition privileges do like to go to vacations in warm places where sometimes we do have extradition capabilities. So sometimes they'll show up in a lovely vacation spot and be awarded with some bracelets when they walk off the plane. But it speaks to the fact that at all levels, at the municipal level, if you are operating things like this type of critical infrastructure, that can be, and in this case shows it is, the target of nation-state action. Similar, I don't have the graphic up here, but I've been talking a lot to universities. Universities are a place that have huge pipe, huge bandwidth, and a very difficult ability to implement user rules when you compare that to a government institution, a typical corporate environment. You can't just tell the student body that they're under the same type of restrictions that you can tell to your employee population. As such, you have a tremendous challenge, and oftentimes compounded too if you have white hat hacking courses going on in that academic environment. And so you've got this combination of, in many cases, you're sort of handcuffed as an IT security professional, and you're sitting in front of a tremendous target with great bandwidth, great opportunity to execute things like the denial of service attack that occurred on the U.S. financial institutions. Last thing I put up there is Army-based energy security, obviously very relevant. Here in North Carolina, the Army requested a pretty significant chunk of money this year to make many of their bases more resilient against attack and to provide duplication in case of the local energy supply. If that goes down, they need to be self-sufficient so they can continue to forward deploy and act. What you've seen in different communities, some cases too, they will create this microgrid and then bring in the local hospital and parts of critical infrastructure from the local community so that if the local municipal power goes down, it's not simply the base operating as an island, but also the community gets a benefit from it as well. And so that's an area that I think we're going to need to continue to develop better public-private collaboration on and better collaboration amongst the feds, state, and locals. So let's step back a little bit and talk about what we're seeing sort of at a macro level, because I think that more likely impacts the day-to-day. Physical and cyber are blending, so that started in the industrial control system space, as we've just talked about. But I really see Internet of Things as sort of the democratization of this blending of physical and cyber and the expansion of industrial control systems. So whereas the problem that we've created earlier on by attaching control systems, the power grid, water, etc., to susceptibility and forward-facing internet areas, now your toaster can be an attack vector. Sometimes that is not as relevant. I don't necessarily care if bad guys know what's going on with my toaster. But at the same time, it can be the place to launch certain attacks on other things that do matter a lot more. It can lead to invasion of privacy, it can lead to IP theft, it can lead to turning on the cameras within your home that increasingly every device that you have has a microphone and a camera. And so there are some real world implications of that as well. Second piece, data is massively aggregated and available. So whereas we used to have paper records for everything, we are moving, whether it's in healthcare, state and county records, the DMV, everything is obviously, as you know, more convenient, more accessible through electronic means. It is also easier to get to for the bad guys if we don't adequately apply security, and compute power is limitless. So whereas Moore's law about the inverse relationship, so computing speed and power will go up as price goes down, that really, in the security space, has initially advantaged the bad guys. And And so the cost of launching a attack, which we'll get to in a little bit, has gone down. And the ability to do so has democratized and become a commodity. This slide shows sort of the increasing expansion. So you go from ICS to IoT to now everything. So cloud and virtualization, mobile technologies, how do you secure, bring your own device type environment, whether it's for your municipal employees. You obviously all have forward-facing challenges as well for paying parking tickets, for gun permits, for taxes. And so the increasing use of device within your infrastructure and the potential attack vectors continues to grow. So the other term of art being we continue to increase the attack surface. So the challenges here sort of compound. So known threats continue to go up. I would argue that our prevention against known threats has not kept pace with things that we know are bad. Whether it's your ICS system that's still running Windows 98, or your inability to patch because of challenges within your organization. Testing my eyes here. Invasive command and control. So we continue to see, while the known low-level attacks are not patched for, we continue to see greater capability around command and control, and that again ties to as we connect more things to the internet, we then have a greater ability for the bad guys to leverage that for their own purposes. Unknown and polymorphic malware. So signature-based defense has many, many problems, one of which is if signatures are written to the exact number of ones and zeros of a known bad attack, we now have automatically changing polymorphic malware. So they change a single one or a zero can defeat a traditional signature. So part of the evolution on the security side is to write prevention in a way that it doesn't map one-to-one so that you can scale so that that one preventative signature can map to 100 different variants of things that we know are changing in an automated way. Zero-day exploits and vulnerabilities, there is a continuing development. The bad guys are always working on their own intellectual property, and what we get from that are new zero days at all times. Identity compromise. So increasingly what we're seeing from the Snowden situation to any number of insider threats to compromise of identity. So a typical spear phishing attack that steals credentials from your administrator. That administrator has tremendous access across the network, and bad guys can operate through identity compromise as if they're a legitimate user with full access to the keys to the kingdom. And mobility threat, as we talked about. So the nature of defending an attack onto a mobile device requires a different approach, different TTPs, and different actions than it does to defend against a mainframe, a data center, or to defend typical PC environment. As a result, what we've seen is a $445 billion industry. As a tremendous number and speaks to the basic premise that right now offense wins. Cyber warfare can be a loaded term, but what's meant behind that is that there are reportedly over 100 nations developing cyber forward-looking capabilities. So whether or not there's the ability for 100 nations, which there is not, to launch truly cyber war on entities like the United States, the fact that we are not adequately protected right now in places like control systems in our typical IT environments for all of these challenges means that nation states who may or may not be subject to the same typical type of deterrence that we have seen in a nation state type environment, in a superpower type environment, these tools are being democratized and put into the hands of nation states that from a pure Sun Tzu guerrilla warfare type perspective, can have an outsized impact in what they can execute on a civilized society that relies on IT, that compared to what their conventional forces would ever be capable of. Some of the challenges that we see right now are limited visibility. So you as a network administrator, you as a security professional, may or may not be able to see what is going on fully in your network. That is going to hamper your ability to be able to act and prioritize and prevent against things that matter most. Lacking correlation. So you get hit by me as a vendor, you get hit by somebody else as a vendor, you gotta buy our stuff, right? I got the shiny new product, I have the biggest set of indicators of compromise. The problem with that is you as a customer need to be able to defend your entire network. And far too frequently, and we're seeing a change in this in some of us within the industry, recognize the customer need is the end state, right? And so whether it's making sure that our technology works with each other better, so at the APT detection, at the firewall side, at the endpoint, but we don't have every core capability that you're going to need. So how do we go out and develop partnerships within the industry, other partners that may have different core competencies so that our stuff is deeply technically integrated, works together in a seamless way. Beyond that, you got to recognize that of that sort of triangle I laid out of our main product, which is APT detection, firewall, and endpoint, many of you may have one of our boxes at the firewall, but are using other things for endpoint and threat detection. So how do we recognize the needs of the customer, and how do we make sure that the ecosystem works so that things like APIs are a way that our box can talk to a competitor's box? And we've actually seen that with some pilot programs within the federal government. The Department of Defense is using some of our technology with some of our competitors' technology in those three areas, APT, firewall, and endpoint. And it's incumbent upon the vendor community and also you as consumers to demand that type of interoperability and manual response. Right now, again, as I've been talking to your colleagues, has confirmed the problem that we're seeing everywhere. And this is a problem whether you're the Department of Defense and you've got tens of thousands of people to throw at it, if you're a big five bank and you've got single thousands of people to throw at it, or if you're the rest of the world, which most of us obviously are, and you've got 12 guys to throw at this problem. And maybe of those 12 guys, most of them are IT guys, and a few of them have ancillary duties as security. And the problem is we rely too heavily in defense on manual, and the attackers are increasingly relying on automated. Get back to that polymorphic malware, get back to the ability to access things that are known vulnerabilities that are not patched for. And I was mentioning earlier today, one of the first things that we did when I was at Department of Homeland Security 5 to 10 years ago was to try and help the United States Senate understand why cybersecurity is relevant. So talking about people of 70, 80 years very frequently, certainly 10 years ago in the makeup of the Senate, who did not rely very heavily on technology. And so one of the things that we did to make this concrete was we would sit them down at one computer and we would be at an attacker computer and use freely available tools online to craft a spear phishing email from a name, so it looked like it was coming from me to my employee. They would sit at my employee's computer. My name would pop up in an email. Within that, what we had downloaded and what we had used to carry the payload was an actual cybersecurity bill that was before Congress at that time. Loaded into that actual cybersecurity bill was malware that gave us control of the computer. So as the senator sat there, clicked on the link within the email, we would then start by turning on the computer, which made it very concrete to them, just how susceptible they were to this type of incident. And then we would steal files, manipulate data, and show them some of the back-end things that are a broader consequence than just turning the camera on. So the challenge here is to restore trust. So as I mentioned before, cybersecurity, fundamentally as we see it, is a math problem. And right now, as the cost to compute continues to go down, the cost to launch a successful attack goes down. That gets back to a lot of things that we've talked so far, which is if I can go online and have a graphical interface with a lot of these sites too, can be dual purpose, right? So they're not exclusively used for that. A lot of them can be used for penetration testing if you don't have the capability to outsource that. But the availability of known attacks means that I am not a hands-on-the-keyboard technical guy, but there are places that I know to go to where I can use a graphical interface and point and click and craft a spear phishing attack that will work on a system that's not adequately patched. And as a result of that, whether it's me who's too dumb to craft that attack, or the third PLA in China, why would a nation state who develops their own zero-day waste the zero-day when the target is susceptible to something that's known and freely available out there? So I frequently come back to this because there's a belief that there's sort of this stratification of individual attackers, really technical guys working out of their hackers working out of their parents' garage, up to criminals, up to nation states. The line is blurred because of this map problem right now, and bad guys are logical actors, and they're taking advantage of the fact that it is low cost to launch a lot of highly successful attacks, and you don't need to waste their own bad guy intellectual property on those types of things. So as a result, the focus needs to be on flipping that. Well, you'll never stop everything. We agree with that principle. But we can make it far more expensive and far more difficult to launch a successful attack by starting with the basics, right? So removing the known bads and preventing against those things. And increasing the cost to develop intellectual property. What you do is you bring the capable, you remove the low-level guys, the guys that like me or don't have the technical capability. And by the way, I'm not launching successful attacks on anyone. I just mean those that don't have the capability to develop these types of things. So you take those people low level out of the equation, and then what you get to is a one-on-one you against more capable adversaries. That makes them more distinct. By using their intellectual property, attribution becomes a lot easier, and it allows us as individuals, as professionals, to focus on the things that truly require human intervention and human presence. So solutions to this, number one, prevention technology. The last 10 years or so, what we've seen is a philosophical shift to, because I'm chasing fires all the time, because prevention didn't work in 5 to 10 years ago, then we can't prevent, we've got to just detect and remediate. I think that comes from a couple of things. One is that prevention, as we saw this 5 to 10 years ago, was at 2 points. It was exclusively at the network perimeter based on signatures, and it was traditional antivirus. Those two means of prevention are inadequate, both because they rely too heavily on signatures, and also because they don't see everything, they don't attack the entire kill chain and life cycle of attack, the steps that the bad guy needs to go through. But as a result, there's been sort of a philosophical abandoning of prevention in a lot of cases, and we're never going to be ahead of the curve if we're just detecting and remediating. I've long believed that when we were focused on breaches. I was saying again to some of your colleagues today, whether you're a government official trying to tell your agency head, or if you're the CEO of a company, and we've seen this happen to some companies in the last few years, being able to tell your board of directors, your agency head, I know that we've been owned, and I can tell you when it happened. I don't think that's an effective position to be in. That problem is compounded in a ransomware type environment, because the bad guys tell you that you're owned, and they tell you need to pay up, or else you're not going to get access to your system back. So that may be access to your grandchildren's pictures and family videos. That could be access to critical systems within the hospital that people rely on for life-saving on a minute-by-minute basis. Number two is threat sharing. So as I talk through the need for integration, threat sharing is an important piece of that. I'll get a little bit into some of the mechanisms of this later, but the fundamental philosophy is we as a community, whether government, federal government, internationally, state, local, municipal, down to the security community and industry in all different verticals, from financial to energy, we need to share knowledge of what is known to be bad out there and collectively take steps to prevent against it. So by increasing the knowledge of what is bad, threat sharing is going to be required for us to get ahead of the attackers, and cyber education. So that starts with making sure that your workforce, your family and loved ones, we're getting better at not clicking on the Nigerian prince, but we're still, as a society and a community, not great at knowing not to click on links. And so we need to do a better job of that. We as a security company have a huge internal focus on that. So we spearfish our own employees. If If you click on that link, you are in a ransomware form taken immediately to a training that you must pass before you go back to your day-to-day job. That's just basic education that has to happen. And you know, we can't be the guys that get spearfished, right? However, when I go back to that spearfishing example that I gave before that we did for the United States Senate, we're all moving fast, and even if you were pretty meticulous about it, if you see an email from the name of your boss or your employee with a legitimate file on it that is the actual Cybersecurity Act of 2012, if I need to do that for my job, my boss tells me I gotta read this and then give them the highlights, I'm gonna open that attachment. And so there's a certain piece that requires education, again, to sort of weed out the low level. There's another piece of this that needs to be accompanied by vendors need to be better, the technology industry needs to be better at preventing, if you click on that link, you shouldn't be allowed to connect to it. So we need to raise the cyber education piece of this, and at the same time, we need to complement that with the right process and technology. Security needs to be consistent. So all endpoints. One, do you know, get back to visibility, do you know where your endpoints are? Do you know if you're a mixed, bring your own device, data center, desktop environment, and do you have visibility and protections on all of those endpoints? Two, at the internet edge. So again, the perimeter is not a singular point of failure, and you don't win or lose everything at that. But you need to know what's transiting, what's ingressing and egressing in the network, having both visibility and protections at that place for known bad, and ideally preventing against things that are not known to a certain extent. Between employees and devices. So the goal is that somebody can't spearfish one individual and then escalate privileges to act as the IT administrator for your entire organization, to access your data center from some remote workstation somewhere out within your organization, to make sure that they don't look like they're the CEO with access to all the intellectual property they have. Again, at the data center and edge and between virtual machines. So network segmentation is a huge part of this. Your IT environment is different than your OT environment. How are you protecting against the data center, and how is that configured in a way so that if somebody does get in, if you experience, ideally you're preventing all the known bads, so you experience a 0-day, a very sophisticated social engineering attack, how do you isolate that one computer or that part of the network from the data center and where your organization or your agencies or your county's crown jewels are, and within clouds and SaaS. So again, we're increasingly moving from traditional technologies, and a lot of people are moving from a data center that requires a lot of physical infrastructure to a cloud type environment. How do we ensure that we're not in the same situation we were 5 to 10 years ago, where prevention just at the edge failed us because it was limited in capabilities? As we're moving our functionality to the cloud and to SaaS, we need to evolve our security to move to each of those places as well. Number one for threat sharing. We really realizing I need to get glasses now. Move past that point of pride. Number one for threat sharing, we need to turn unknowns into known. So our APT, Advanced Persistent Threat Capability, we generate 1.1 million new preventative signatures every week. This is not a company pitch. We are part of the ecosystem. Many vendors have that type of thing. But at scale, that shows you the number of 0 days that we just as a company are seeing. We turn that within 5 minutes from seeing an unknown into preventative measures. 5 minutes, we turn that into a preventative measure. Another 5 minutes, that goes up to 30,000 customers around the world. So turning knowns into unknowns, unknowns into knowns for the sake of prevention is number one. Automatically share known threats. So as we see that, we shouldn't just be the only ones benefiting from that. There are increasingly programs and mechanisms that we can tap into to ensure that others within the security community, to ensure that our customers who have capabilities within, particularly we see it a lot of times in the financial sector, in the defense sector, sometimes in various places within the government, are aware of these new and evolving threats as well. And automatically we program all networks with the new knowledge. So moving towards the type of prevention that is far more akin to the human immune system. So your body recognizes unknown things that are acting in odd and inappropriate ways. The computer ecosystem right now, in a security perspective, doesn't adequately adapt to that. So we need to be able to recognize the unknown, turn them into known, and prevent against them far more quickly. Cyber Threat Alliance is an organization that was formed by 4 CEOs of security companies. Ourselves, Palo Alto Networks, Intel Security, Symantec, and Fortinet. We are peers and competitors in different parts of the security arena, but there was a recognition amongst these 4 companies that no one entity is going to be able to generate all of the indicators of compromise that you out in the ecosystem need to rely on. And as such, we all benefit if we have shared information, if we see what others are seeing and are able to plug that into our technology. That is a new model within the security industry, from my opinion. I think traditionally what you as customers have been saddled with is buy our stuff, buy their stuff, buy the other guy's stuff. You figure out how to integrate that, and or you just hope that those things aren't integrated. But by providing 8 layers of that, hopefully the latency isn't terrible, and hopefully you are stopping everything through plugging all of those things together in line. So what we are now doing is sharing 1,000 unique pieces of malcode a day. And so there are other information sharing examples. The most commonly known is the ISAC. So I'd say probably the leader amongst that. MS ISAC is great. Financial services, ISAC was sort of the founding member, I think, and a leader in the ISAC community. Those entities that participate in the FS ISAC pay to be part of that model. It makes sense because not everybody has the minimum capability to share out, so they can benefit from that. But within the security industry, what we thought was we are seeing this tremendous amount of zero-day activity every day, and the barrier to entry ought to be sharing, not just paying to play. So we require sharing of 1,000 pieces of malware a day, and also it can't be old stuff. You can't dig up things from 1998 and send it out. So there's an online repository called Iris Total. What's shared is checked against that to ensure that that was not present for the 48 hours prior to sharing. So that is sharing of zero-day information. When you get back to by differences in the Cyber Threat Alliance versus the financial sector ISAC or MS ISAC, each of those are industry verticals. And so that is set out to the that information is set out from the FS ISAC to financial institutions. Each one of those institutions, which varies widely from an insurance company to a big bank, top 5 bank, and then other big banks that you would know about down to the community level bank. Each one of those needs to have the capability to act upon that information. Sharing amongst security vendors takes that step out of the loop. What you as the customer benefit from is the sharing from us to Symantec to Fortinet to McAfee. So it gets plugged in immediately, and you receive the benefit of those protections without having to take action yourself. This, I think, is going to be crucial to continue to change this sort of philosophical piece within the security vendor community. I think the line is continuing to be worked out right now, where there are some who still have the old mentality that indicators of compromise my intellectual property, and I need to closely guard all of those secrets. There are others who sell threat intelligence as a service, and I think what will be worked out over time, and hopefully sooner rather than later, is there's a distinction between sharing indicators of compromise, just raw information, with broader contextual information that's either campaign-focused or more specific to your organization. And so there's a very legitimate business model around threat intelligence as a service and for sale. But at the same time, no one entity is going to be able to scale, and that includes NSA and any government agency out there. And so how do we ensure that everybody has a level playing field with as much of the basic information as possible, and we're defending against those types of things. Last piece we talked a little bit about is education, so that certainly starts from an organizational construct with educating employees. This is the cybersecurity exhibit that we sponsored at the San Jose Technology Museum. So kids can actually go here and get online and in a controlled environment, white hat type stuff and defense. So you actually see red teaming and blue teaming. I've just talked to several people who are government professionals that went out to this and said that they were getting crushed by the kids in the exhibit who were outperforming them tremendously in a red team, blue team type environment. But this general awareness needs to go on. So we need to get everybody in the community, not just our employees, up to a basic level. Away from the Nigerian prince level, beyond several other levels. So you probably didn't win $150 from Walmart around Christmas time. Having that targeted around news events, having people understand and aware that many of these, the Bin Laden assassination was actually a big vector for spear phishing attacks. So you frequently see that around the holidays, around large news events, and educating the general public about those types of things is incredibly important. It's something that we're involved in. And then from a vendor perspective as well, we need to ensure that people know how to utilize the capability that we put out in our products. So if we convince any of you to go with us and install our technology, and you migrate over your old firewall rules into our firewall and don't utilize the capability, that doesn't help you as a customer, it doesn't help us as a vendor, it doesn't differentiate our technology, and it doesn't make your ecosystem safer. And so education needs to occur at the general level, at the employee level, and as part of the relationship between vendors and operators. And with that, I'd like to pause and take some questions. I know it's Friday morning after the party. I told my wife we called it a lottery in about an hour, and she said, "Oh my God, I can't imagine listening to you talk for an hour." I caught like 40 slides just after the conversation. Anybody? All right. Anything that you all want to talk, part of what I'd like to do is take back to the company. Are there unique challenges that you all face? I mentioned I got to sit down and do some small group discussions, and sort of everything from the day-to-day challenge up to the highest probability, the highest consequence type attack on an ICS system. But the number one problem that I've heard gets to this, we're constantly chasing fires. There's only so much I can get through in a day, in a week, in a month. Even things that are high priority get pushed to next week, and then next week comes, and I got a whole new set of fires. And to me, that gets back to we're doing far too much on the defensive side in a manual way. You need to have the tools so that you, with limited resources, and again, everybody from the Department of Defense, the big five banks, to a rural county that may have only a few people doing security and maybe just as ancillary duties. We are all relying on a model that's far too manually focused. Talking to state level officials recently, and I'll keep the state anonymous, that said, it's not here, that said we have 20,000 open cybersecurity jobs. And I said, how many of those are jobs that machines should be doing so that highly trained professionals can be working on the 0 day, the things that are of highest consequence? Right now, we're just starting to quantify the open jobs from economic opportunity perspective, from everybody's trying to hire from us as a company to DoD and NSA. Feels like they may be losing out to companies, to the challenges that you all may have, and I've heard from some of those. So competition within states, in different regions and localities, and cost of living adjustments that I know well from the federal government perspective comes down to different areas of an individual state. So I do think a big part of countering the workforce challenge is, number one, making sure that people are focused on jobs that people are uniquely capable of. And there truly will be certain things always that are of highest consequence that machines are not going to be able to handle for us. So this is not a moving people out of the workforce issue. This is about working smarter and being able to automate defenses against automated attacks. We're also doing a lot in partnering with educational institutions, both for what we call academic academies. So through institutions of higher learning, through universities, through community colleges, we're doing a lot more training on our equipment. We're also recognizing, and I've heard this from some of your colleagues too, that distance learning has to be a huge part of this. I fundamentally believe that if from the general education, from K through 12, by the time you train the trainer in a K through 12 environment, I don't believe that scales. I think kids, just like those kids in the museum, are outpacing government professionals in a lot of cases, from the federal level that are supposed to do this on a day-to-day basis. I truly believe that in a lot of cases, children are going to be able to pick this stuff up and become fabric through distance learning, and we need to leverage that type of technology to, in a lot of cases, skip over us who come from a different generation and get that directly in the hands of kids. My oldest son just turned 2 last weekend. He is capable of swiping to the apps that he wants, and those 2 apps are pictures of himself and Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. And so it is staggering the way that technology gets into the hands of kids. And right now, it's similar to the way that we have relied on these things traditionally, which is that technology comes on for efficiency, for availability, because these features are cool. We need to build security into that same type of education at the basic level and pushed out through educational institutions. Yeah, please.
So one of your first slides was talking about different verticals.
Yep.
And you had, finance and grid and all those other things. And it seemed to me that your presentation was about how do we defend these silos.
Yes.
When it comes to our challenges here, is that we county may have a human services department. City can have acceptance of credit cards. We may have some SCADA systems. So it's not just one. And I think the question, the challenge is that different verticals have different policies. Where is that lowest common denominator? We have to comply to something and then exceed those expectations in these verticals.
Yes.
That's the challenge.
Yep. So for those who didn't hear, the question was, initially I talked about different silos, different verticals, different approaches, but much of the talk focuses on the common problems that we all face. And one of the things that is dissatisfying about cybersecurity is that we need to find as much commonality as possible. We need to find automated solutions across all sectors. And so Cyber Threat Alliance, I think, is an example of that. So whether you're an industry, whether you're a customer of the MSISAC, whether you're a regional government that's running everything at a municipal level, from healthcare information and processing tickets down to ICS, there are common things that can be defended against across all of those silos. But the environment is complex, and it requires a recognition of the differences from industry to industry as you move from defending a typical IT environment to defending an ICS and SCADA environment that in many cases, again, is probably running Windows 98 and has different challenges. So in the IT environment, you can do Patch Tuesday, assuming that you don't have policy challenges within your organization to even push out Patch Tuesday. But in the electric grid, power needs to stay on. And so patching, I actually just heard from an institution, one of the 20th that they're in a situation where their FDA grants require them to maintain the environment action exactly as it was when it was certified. That doesn't allow for patching. That's a tremendous problem that needs to be accounted for in a different way than a Patch Tuesday type environment. So there are ways to get to that too. So one of the things that we look at is an exploit focus at the endpoint, right? So typical endpoint security comes through antivirus and is signature based. So identifying specific types of malware and defending against those types of things. As we talked about with polymorphic malware, those ones and zeros of a specific attack change at an almost constant basis, so it can't keep up. By being focused on exploits, what we have found is that there are generally about 2 dozen different exploit types. What that means is buffer overflow is a typical exploit type. There's never a legitimate functionality for your system to allow for a buffer overflow. So at the endpoint, you should prevent against allowing for buffer overflow. There are other exploit techniques that take 3 to 4 legitimate functions, unlike buffer overflow, used in series to basically insert malware. By recognizing that those are legitimate functions, but there is a pattern of those 3 legitimate functions being used in series, that's the way the exploit is executed and the malware is inserted. Preventing those types of things from occurring from an exploit focus means that you don't necessarily need to update Windows 98, which is an unsupported system anyways. And so, the distinctions, you know, the more time I've spent on critical infrastructure too, the distinctions don't even break down along industry verticals. And I think you illustrated it well with the diversity of challenges that you have just within a municipal organization.
Well, technology is one aspect of this, but really what I was getting at is, it seems like 4 different companies are incorporating the sharing information about the threat.
Yep.
Are there other bit more global sharing of information when it comes to developing best practices for different types of protection for apps?
Yes.
Whether it's PCI, whether it's SCADA, whether it's HIPAA,
Yep.
and the lowest common denominator
Yep.
that can be applied. Is there some kind of sharing like that?
Yeah, so the question is important, and I should emphasize this up front too. His point was Cyber Threat Alliance is sharing indicators of compromising threat intelligence amongst each other, but are there people, process, and technology approaches, true best practices that you as security professionals or IT professionals can apply to your organization? I'd point you to the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework, NIST framework. President Obama's State of the Union in 2013, he issued an executive order that kicked off the starting of the NIST cybersecurity framework. This was in the wake of legislative debate that fell apart along partisan lines about whether or not there should be mandatory cybersecurity regulation for core critical infrastructure, that which, if brought down by cybersecurity means, could lead to national and economic severe impacts. What developed then was a voluntary process under NIST where they went out to industry and said, there's a tremendous amount of knowledge within the private sector. There's unique knowledge within the government. How do we identify best practices and come up with a common set of those that can be identified and applied for a municipality, can be applied for a federal government agency, can be applied for a financial sector company, and can be applied for an energy sector company, all across the board. What came out of that were 5 basic principles. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. So those 5 core elements are required regardless of what type of entity you are. The NIST framework allows you to benchmark also where you are within that framework. And Department of Homeland Security, I'm not going to give you the full acronym, but it's called the C-Cube, C with the third power, voluntary program, is an adoption mechanism. So you can basically, you could actually bring in DHS to take a look at your maturity and application to that. Or you can go online and you can essentially fill out, I'm mapping in this way to ISO standards, I'm mapping in this way to NIST 800 technical standards. This is how I stack up from a maturity model perspective along those 5 areas of best practice. The other thing that I think is really valuable, and I think it is sometimes missed by true technical professionals about the NIST framework. The NIST framework is not technical. It's not specific. But what it is a common nomenclature that you as security professionals can talk to executives about the investments that you are making, how you have identified risk within your organization. So we know the crown jewels are here. We know these are the potential vulnerabilities that we are experiencing, and this is how the stuff that I'm finding drives down the risk that I've identified to the organization. I think that is a critical piece of, and I probably should have hit on that as part of the education. C-suite education, agency leader education, getting to the folks that control the budget is a huge issue. And I see the cybersecurity framework as a great tool for that dialogue. We also have a book that we jointly put out. It's a free book produced with the New York Stock Exchange. It's called Navigating the Digital Age. It is intended to be a how-to cybersecurity guide with over 30 guest authors from law firms, insurance companies, financial institutions on different aspects of cybersecurity geared towards the non-technical executive audience. Because whether you're an agency head or whether you're a CEO or on a board of directors, what you do understand is I've got core functions within my organization, and OPM is a great example of an agency that didn't see cybersecurity necessarily as a legacy core mission, but I will tell you that they absolutely see it as such now. That transformation is going on, and I think we've scared a lot of senior leaders to say, I've got to care about this. I've seen the target CEO fired, I've seen the OPM director replaced, but then what do I do about it? And so I think that this framework is a really good best practices guideline that gives you a framework where you can map what you're doing and speak English to people who are non-technical and probably making resource decisions.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Brian's got a clean case.